Welcome to Mendezville Live, where it's something to talk about. Here is Rudy Mendez.
What's going on, Mendezville Live? Today's show is brought to you by Elite Wellness Center, located at 1217 North 10th Street, McAllen, Texas. Call them for all your wellness needs. Also by For Life, Together Building People. We are the immune system company. And of course, if you need more information or you want some For Life Transfer Factor molecule supplements, we are at forlife.com/Rudy Mendez. Sponsorships are out of the way. Marketing is out of the way. Mendezville Live, man, we got a nice guest, man. Last time I saw him was way back when, and then I made a post on my Facebook. You know me doing the Facebook post, and you know I got some feedback and whatever. We'll talk about it here in a little bit. But before we go into the guest for tonight, we give you a heads up for next week. Coming week, I already have about 4 people with the school board elections coming up, running for school board, La Jolla ISD. I also have some people scheduled for the city of Palmview. That election is going to be neat. So I got some guests coming in. We're going to be talking politics, their agenda, explaining different situations. So I'm excited for that. You know, make sure that everybody gets time and no debates. No debates. It's just, hey, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just points of view and perspective. I'm all about informing the voter and make as objective votes as possible. And that's where we're headed. But either way, enough about that for next week. We're starting on Sunday. Actually, on Sunday, I'm going with 2 guests. I got one at 8 and at 10:30. So that's going to be pretty good. So without further ado, let's introduce my guest. He is currently State Representative, House District 35. He covers West Hidalgo County and Western Cameron County. My man, Oscar Longoria. What's going on, Oscar Longoria? How you doing, man?
Pretty good, Rudy. How are you doing?
Doing all right, man. I was telling the audience, and I know people don't know about this, but we went to. Hey, before that, thank you for being on the show, man. Thank you so much for being on the show.
I appreciate the invite.
I'm sure when you reached out to me was back when I posted that post about property taxes and putting you on blast or putting the neighboring. Who's the guy? You know what? Who's the guy next door right here? Who's the state rep next door right here?
Well, there's a couple of reps. You have Representative Ryan Guillen, which encompasses Stark County, Representative Bobby Guerra, which encompasses a little bit of Palmview, Representative Sergio Munoz as well. So there's a couple of reps that represent South Texas.
Bobby Guerra and Sergio Munoz. I'm probably going to run against one of those guys here in the next few years, but we'll see. Nothing against them. It's just I want to get in the mix. Who knows? Hey, but either way, so I remember I posted that, and I got some phone calls like, hey, man, leave that guy alone. Why are you bullying or why are you doing that? I was like, my thing was, I don't know who I need to talk to. I have no idea who I'm supposed to talk to. Who do I go to? And of course, we'll get into that, towards the later of the politics of the show. And I'm sure people want to know about your job and, what's going on in the state. And I got some ideas from they're not my own, people reach out and stuff like that. But hey, man, let's start from the beginning. I knew you, the good memories. I mean, I don't have any bad memories of you, right? But the good memories I remember back in the day, we're in junior high, Memorial Middle School. You're in 7th grade. I'm in 8th grade. You're wearing the Jordans. Big Jordan fan. I see the poster behind you. Man, those were some good times, man.
Great times, man. Back in the day, Memorial Middle School, I tell everybody I'm a proud Coyote. I went to La Jolla when there was only one high school. And, it was a big high school, but, very proud of being a Coyote.
Yeah, puro Coyote, papa, puro Coyote. Hey, exactly. I'll tell you what, Oscar, I didn't know. So I came back to the district to work at the district after working at 3 different universities. I started my teaching profession at Ann Richards Middle School. And I ended up working with Mrs. Longoria, not knowing she was your mom. I'll tell you what, though. Like if I knew I always wanted to go into coaching, right? I was like, I'm going to be a coach. But man, your mom is an amazing. I don't even come close to her teaching style, teaching method. I was just like, and every time I go into her classroom, I'm like, man, this lady is amazing. Like, how does she have the time? You could tell she had a lot of passion. So, hey, when you see her or if she's watching the show, hey, Mrs. Longoria, man, my hat's off to her. She's an amazing teacher, man.
I will tell her that. She may be asleep by now, Rudy. But
we kind of start off late. Well, she can catch it on tomorrow on YouTube or whatever it may be, man.
Yeah.
Good times, man. All right, so and then I lost track of you. So you go to high school. Did you graduate from La Jolla?
Yeah, I graduated from La Jolla, class of 2000, and then I stayed here for 1 year down in South Texas. I was going to South Texas Community College at the
Okay,
time, which is
cool.
now STC. I did a year there at South Texas Community College. I transferred up to the University of Texas in Austin, and I received a degree in corporate communications in '03. So I finished a year early. Came back home and just tried finding odd jobs. I know I wanted to go to law school, and that was something I wanted to do. So, that year that I took off, I took my LSAT and I submitted my applications. And fortunately, I ended up back at the University of Texas, where I got my law degree and graduated in '07.
Oh, hey, Oscar. So very important. Let's just take. Hold on. Let me change. Let me just change this bad boy. Very important message right now. I want to give to the young youth and students in the area. You go to STC. For some people that don't know out there, you're very successful. You've made a name for yourself. You're in the state rep, and a lot of kids in the area might not want to go to STC, the bad rep, the college. But can you tell us what is the reason that you went to STC before you went to UT? How did that happen?
I really didn't know what I wanted to do. Like a lot of, high school students that graduate, I didn't know if I wanted to go into some type of career in technology or just, start working. And I just figured, I'm going to go to the community college, see what they have to offer. The best thing that we had as students in La Jolla is we had concurrent enrollment, right? Which allowed us to get, those dual credits. So
Yeah.
I believe my class in 2000, I think they may have started in yours, Rudy, back in '99, were some of the first classes that had that.
Yeah.
So when I graduated from high school, I already had some hours. So I said, you know what, maybe I'll go and get my associate's degree. So I went and I pursued my studies there. And then, I said, you know what, I'm going to try to get my bachelor degree. And then from there, see what ends up happening. So I transferred up to UT, applied and got into UT, finished my studies there. And then I knew I had this passion that I kind of wanted to pursue law. Now, mind you, nobody in my family is a lawyer. I really didn't know what lawyers did. I just kind of what I saw on TV and what I had read. But just over time, it worked out. And what I like to tell everybody is, look, I'm a kid that grew up in the mile lines, rode the bus, went to public school. I'm very grateful for the position that I'm in right now. I'm very blessed. But if I could do it, anybody can.
Yeah. You grew up what, like on 5 Mile Line, no?
Yeah, like North Dauphin, in the miles, and we would take the bus every day. And it's amazing now when you go through 107, which is the bus route we would take. I mean, at that point in time, it was just fields, and now there's just so much development, and so many people live out there. So, it's just I'm very lucky, and I'm very grateful to La Jolla ISD and very grateful to the University of Texas to be in the position that I'm in right now.
Yeah. So
and South Texas College.
Yeah, that's awesome that we get to share some of your background, because some of the athletes or some of the students that might watch this here in the next few days, hey, you're eres de las mías, papa. You're from the miles, baby. You're from the miles, and you start at STC, and some kids might not see that as a good option, but it is. I've learned over the course of the year. Actually, I did a summer program there for teachers, for educators to go and check out their programs, and man, I was amazed at all the different programs that they offer for young adults, young students, trying to figure out what they want to do. Wait, seeing that you were in UT, let me ask you this, because I'm a UTSA Roadrunner, bro. But before UTSA Roadrunner, and I still have to buy a poster. I haven't put it up there, but I had to do the soccer stuff for my son, try to get him into soccer.
Hey, well, before anything, we can go to the game, because I believe we're going to play UTSA on the first game.
Hey, let's do it. Let's
go.
What's the date on that? What's the date on that?
I don't know. I saw it online. So, we were going to play LSU, and because of what's happened, in the conferences, I think UTSA will be our first game this season.
Hey, let's go.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. And we'll go Mendezville live real quick. Holla.
Yes. No, I give you an invitation. I don't know if they're going to allow fans in there, but if they do,
that's true.
I'm sure I can find us some tickets. So by all means, Rudy, we'll go out there.
Okay. But see, and that's where I was headed though, because I remember before we had the football team, I mean, everybody at UT was either Longhorns and the Aggies. And I've always, and it's just Longhorns and the Aggies. Vince Young, bro. Were you in school at that time, or you were already alumni when they go against USC?
I was in law school at the time that we played.
What a great time.
Yeah, it was. When I was there, we had a lot of ups and downs. A lot of promising seasons where unfortunately we weren't able to finish it off at the end. But I was able to see VY take it down.
I was at the time I was working on my master's, working at Indiana State, and I got a bunch of Domer fans, Notre Dame, anti-USC, the push. It was during that season, the push. I don't know if you remember that game. I'm sure the Indiana State people remember that game. So when USC goes against Texas, they're like, man, Rudy, Texas better win. That's your state. The Longhorns better. And it was one of those where that when they make those replays on 30 for 30 or those specials, it's like everybody knew VY was taking it to the house. That last play. Come on, man.
Yeah, I consider VY a friend. I actually was texting with him this week.
Oh, yeah?
He tells me the whole story. Some of the content may not be appropriate for this show.
Yeah. Time out, Oscar. You're breaking up a little bit. There, okay,
make sure he gets it done. And I said, he's a gamer and he just has that instinct to make sure he gets things done. And I mean, he's an amazing athlete. Even today. And it's just amazing what he did with the University of Texas and able to get us a national championship. And what's funny is I actually met Lendell White through Vince. And I was giving him a hard time about that season because he had an opportunity on I think it was a 4th down in that game to kind of shut it down, and unfortunately he wasn't able to get it. But surprisingly, Vince goes to the NFL, plays for the Titans, and then him and Lendell ended up becoming great friends because they both played there together.
Okay, nice. That's how you met Lendell?
Yes, sir.
At the Titans. I'll tell you what, I met Lendell. I got to meet Lendell at one of the clubs in LA when I was out there because I got to work at Loyola Marymount University, and some of the students like, hey, we're gonna throw a party fundraiser. Come on out, hang out. So you go hang out for a little bit, go home. And sure enough, there's Lendell White. I'm like, man, that's a big guy, and I don't know how someone introduced me. Hey, what's going on, man? He's like, yeah, I'm from Texas. He's like, oh man, you're in Texas, but he gave me a little hard time, but seems like a great guy, man.
Yeah, he is.
Cool, man. Hey, so tell me this. I know. When I was at my 4th year, and for people out there watching, for our youth, because part of my program is teaching young students, especially the high school students, is the story. Quick little story is I went to the summer program at UTSA, the Pre-Law Institute. I really enjoyed it. I liked reading the books, the torts, and all this logic stuff. But I made a decision to go into the sports, intramurals, higher ed, whatever it may be. Can you give us a little bit of background for those young adults aspiring to be lawyers? What kind of grind is that?
It's a grind. The first year is probably your toughest year, right? That's kind of where you get tested, right? You tested to take the bar exam, right, and get licensed in whatever respective state. But surprisingly, the first year in law school is where they teach you pretty much all the foundation that you need to pass that bar exam. And you go from your academics, and then you go into this legal career where they teach a lot from opinions based on judicial opinions. So when you're there and you're reading it, you're just getting pieces of cases and dispositions and what judges ultimately are ruling. And then at the very end, it kind of all comes together. But when you're doing it, you're like, why am I reading all these pages for? Why am I just getting this one point of law? But it really teaches you to think like a lawyer. And the reason that's important is the laws always change, right? The legislatures, the federal government, they're constantly changing laws. So what law school really does is it prepares you to kind of understand, word of research, look at the mindset, kind of, they call it thinking like a lawyer and thinking outside of the box. And that's kind of what law school prepares you to do. It's very challenging. I tell everybody, having a law degree doesn't force you to just be a lawyer. I mean, you can go into business, you can go into whatever endeavor you want. And it's really a good degree. I told everyone to go ahead and aspire for if you want to attain, a law degree. I said, go. And it doesn't mean you have to practice law. You can do something else.
And it's a misconception that a lot of people think is like you graduate law school, but not everybody practices law.
That's correct, Rudy. When I went to my law school reunion, I mean, it seemed like almost half the students there that had graduated with me were not practicing law and doing something different.
Yeah, they do something different. It's just like most majors too. You graduate with a degree, you do something totally different. It just you never know what life's gonna throw at you. I guess. Good message for the students out there. Before we continue and pursue on how you got into the journey, after law school, what you did, how you got in, and all these things is. Let me just give a shout out to the class of 2000. Let me make an announcement. So for people that don't know, La Jolla Coyotes out there, the Ballers. So a few days ago, I put in I did a Facebook post, a picture of my team back in '99. And, there was a big old thread. They went at it. Alan Montalvo, Braulio, Juan Muñiz, just a bunch of people who's better. I call Eric Montalvo, hey, man, I told you about this great idea 3-4 years ago. A buddy of mine in San Antonio does it. My fraternity brother, Flounder, well, that's his nickname, Flounder, Steven Castilleja. They have an alumni tournament. So for the ballers out there, La Jolla Coyotes, we're working on an alumni basketball tournament just for fun. And I reached out to my man, Oscar Longoria. Oscar, you plan on playing with us out there or what?
I'm down. As a matter of fact, I'll sponsor the uniforms for the class of 2000.
for the class of 2000, just for the class of 2000.
Yeah. You guys are going to show up in your Raggedy Ann 1 shorts, but we're going to get new uniforms.
Hey, back in the day, Ryan Warren was $45 shorts, man.
They were.
Now they're like $10, $12.
I don't know. I think they're making a comeback.
The question before we get all this serious is, what pair of Jordans are you going to wear?
You know what?
Which was your favorite? Hello, Oscar. You're freezing up.
Probably were the 30s. I think kind of still hold the test of time.
Which ones?
Can you hear me, Rudy?
Yeah, go ahead. You froze up a little bit. Go ahead.
I would think if I go with old school, maybe the 12 or the 13s. I just think they're built, really tough. I still have some pairs. I like the newer technology, right? But I think I'll go old school.
Okay.
We got to bring back the old school shoes if we're gonna play a reunion game, right?
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. That'll work. So just a little announcement. Hopefully you'll be a special guest. We'll see what's going on. Hopefully Eric Montalvo's watching. We'll see. So you graduate law school, and then what happens after that?
So when I graduated from law school, I was trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to stay in Austin, but I always had this passion to come back to the Valley. So I returned. I started practicing down here at a local firm. Did that for about 2 years, and then I went on my own and opened up my own office and haven't looked back since then. It's amazing. I came back in 2007. 2020. It's been several.
You're breaking up again. I'm sorry. Say that again. 2007 and then?
2007 is when I came back down and started practicing down here. I was working at a firm at the time. Did that for 2 years, and then I opened up my own shop and went on my own.
I bet that was a little nerve-wracking at the beginning, maybe?
It is. Having a law practice like running a business. It's feast or famine, depending on as business comes in. So, as any business owner, it made me, realize like what it is to pay rent, what it is to, pay utilities, insurance, and everything that comes with owning a business. So it gave me an appreciation for all the small business owners.
And that's that's what you do right now. That you still with your business right there, lawyer?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Cool, man. Cool. So is it criminal law or just for people out there to know?
I mostly do personal injury, civil law,
okay.
First party claims, individuals that may have disputes with their insurance. So mostly civil stuff. It allows me to practice because, me coming back and forth as a state representative, sometimes it's very difficult to make a lot of the court hearings, and practicing civil law still allows me to practice and continue my obligations as being a state representative.
Oh, nice. Well, seeing that you already mentioned it. So how do you get into state representative? What ticked in your mind that said, I got to run to be representative, or how did that work?
So at the time, I came back down. I was on a utility district. I got appointed to serve on a utility district. And when my term expired, there was a position that had opened up at South Texas Community College, now South Texas College, right? So I ran for the position. I got elected. I served my term there. It was an unexpired term. I think I did 3 years, right? So it was a 4-year term. Once my term expired, I decided I wasn't going to seek re-election. Now, this is very important what I'm going to say right now. So every 10 years, we go through a census process. We're going through it right now, right?
Right.
So back in 2010, we're going through the census, and we're basically, doing the numbers and finding out how many seats are going to be allocated, congressional, and where the state representative and Senate seats will go in the legislature, right? So what ends up happening is there's a lawsuit because of the redistricting process, and the courts decide to award another seat, state representative seat down in South Texas, which is House District 35. And that's when I ran for that position. So I ran for that position in 2012, and I got elected and started serving in the legislature in 2013.
Oh, okay. So you didn't start as a state rep. You started with the district, utility district, STC or STCC at the time. And then you move on from there. Oh, wow.
Yes, sir.
Not bad. So can you tell us a little bit about your responsibilities, the gig up there in Austin?
Okay, so I'm one of 150 members. The way it works is we have 150 House members and we have 31 senators. Okay, and then of course we have the governor. So you have the Senate, you have the House, the Lieutenant Governor, and the governor. That's kind of the bodies of government. So when I got there in 2013, it was my first session there. I served on appropriations at the time, which is the committee that kind of handles the finances for the state. And I served on investments and financial services. This is in 13. In 15, I still served on appropriations and on investments in financial services. In 17, the vice chairman of the committee, Mayor Sylvester Turner, he ended up leaving the legislature to run for mayor of Houston. So it opened up the vacancy as the vice chairman. And I was placed as vice chairman of the budget for the House side. And I served there, and I served on legislative budget board, which is another committee that works hand in hand with the appropriation process. In 19, I went back, and I still have my position as the vice chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. I serve on legislative budget board, calendars, which does the calendaring of the bills, and on investments in financial services, which is now called investments and pensions.
Man, I am so wet behind the ears, man. Now you just a bunch of good. I'm sure it's a serious, and so I guess my next question is, can you give us like what that looks like a week or a day in the life of Oscar Longoria as a state rep over there, man?
Okay, so whenever we're in the midst of the budget, I wake up at about 6 o'clock in the morning, because we usually start at about 7:30, 8 o'clock. We'll meet till about 11 in the morning, right?
At the Capitol.
At the Capitol, we'll gavel in and we'll meet on the House floor. It just depends on how long we're going to be on the House floor. I mean, sometimes we start at 10:30, sometimes we start at 11. We can be on the floor till 7, 8, 9, 10 at night, or sometimes we finish early at 2, 3 in the afternoon. We go back into committee, and we usually meet there until the day's done, and we're done with the business that we have to do. And then just go home, go to my apartment, go to bed, and then just do it again. And we do that constantly, because we meet every other year on odd number years. So we're fixing to meet in 2021, and we meet literally from January to May, unless there's a special session. So within that little period of time, we have to make sure, one bill that get passed, the budget has to get passed, and that's the budget that encompasses the entire state of Texas. And that's how schools get funded. That's how TxDOT gets funded, and everything that goes with that, Texas Department of Public Safety, TEA. The list goes on and on and on.
So then, while you're on the floor, you're talking about all these different things.
Well, on the floor, we'll debate bills and legislative issues, and that's where the laws are being made. But at the same time, the budget process where I get to serve is just kind of a long, prolonged process. So what happens in kind of to explain is, we'll start meeting in the fall, right? And we'll start preparing the budget. And then come January, the budget is filed. Now, the budget changes every session. So one session it's filed by the Senate, which becomes Senate Bill 1. And one session it's filed by the House, which is called House Bill 1. This upcoming session in 2021, it's going to be a House budget. So it's going to be House. File it, and then work on the budget. Throughout the entire process, we take it to the floor, we vote on it. Now, mind you, the Senate is doing the exact same thing, right? They have their own version of the budget. Now, both budgets will be different, because there are several hundred pages. There's going to be some differences. So what ends up happening is, once we vote on both budgets, since the budgets are different, they appoint a conference committee, right? So they get 5 members from the House, 5 from the Senate, to work together and hash out the final budget. And then once we finish that budget, which is sometime usually in, I would say, April, May, kind of towards the tail end of session, we vote on that budget again, House and Senate, and then it gets ultimately sent to the governor's office. That's kind of the way the budget process works. Now, since we work on a lot of estimations, we don't know exactly where things are going. A lot of times, stuff has to get addressed in the beginning of the next session for the prior budget, and that's what they call the supplemental budget. So for everybody out there in Mendezville, so they can understand, is right now, because of the economy and what's happened with the coronavirus, we're looking at about a $4.6 billion budget shortfall on our current budget.
Oh, wow.
So that's money that's owed, that we have to pay, right? Because we were, for some reason, we didn't estimate correctly, or we don't have sufficient funds to cover it, and we have to address that. Because when we do our budget, we're running on projections, anticipating how much money and revenue is coming into the state. Unfortunately, we were hit with the pandemic. Sales tax are down, people aren't driving around, oil and gas has taken a hard hit. So all that coupled together has decreased the state's budget. So now we're going to have to address the budget deficiency that we have for our current budget. And that's not even accounting for the next budget.
Man, that's wow. That's a big responsibility. COVID is, the governor's gotten a lot of slack, the president, and it's just, they're very different opinions from everywhere. TEA and teachers going back. I know you have what, 1 or 2 daughters, or how many kids you have?
I have 2 little girls, 8 and 5, and as a parent, you're very concerned. And it's serious. COVID is serious, and everybody needs to take it, serious, and wear their mask. and continue to practice social distancing. But it's just so many unknowns. We've never dealt with a situation like we're dealing with right now. I'm optimistic that we'll hopefully get some vaccines, for the fall, but it is going to take some time if we do find a vaccine to actually have that, trickle down to the entire public. So I tell everybody, practice social distancing, wear your mask, continue to be active in your life and be healthy, because that's really the best situation you can put yourself if you end up encountering the virus.
Yeah, I know. My wife, she works at Mission Hospital. One day she came home, when we had the COVID spike, and she just straight out said, "Our kids are not going to go to school." And I was like, "Okay, I got to figure this out." And then, she said, "You're not going to go work out anymore at True Fit. You're not going to the gym anymore." I was like, "Okay, what do I tell the person that's seeing people die on a daily basis?" So it got real serious real quick. It is what it is now. People can talk about hindsight. Who knows? But, I think we're all on the same page now. It is serious, and we got to take all the precautions we can. The appropriations budget, I know I got a lot of people, ask him this, ask him that. I'm like, man, I don't know anything about politics, man. I just want to ask him about, he's a good old school buddy of mine. We're just going to go and try to inform the people as much as we can. When you talk about appropriations, and this is just me from curiosity, because like I said, I'm very ignorant about what you guys do up there. When you talk about budget and sales tax, like where does all the money, all those billions of dollars that you get, where do they all come from?
Some comes from the federal government. The majority of it in the state of Texas comes from sales tax.
Tax.
When we purchase items and sales tax, there's taxes and registration fees, but we need to be very cognitive that the state of Texas does not have an income tax. Some states do. A state like California has a state income tax aside your federal income tax. In Texas, we don't have that. So the majority of our go ahead.
Well, some people, because I used to live in California, and I don't know the pros and cons behind that. Like, was there a big advantage behind that, or how does that work?
Well, I think the big advantage is for the state, because you have more revenue coming in, because now you have an extra tax. The disadvantage as a person is you're paying your federal taxes, and now you're paying a state income tax as well. Theoretically, if you had a state income tax, you would assume you would have a low sales tax. You would assume everything would be kind of low property taxes, but many times that's not the case. Right. So, I'm very grateful to live in the state of Texas where we don't have a state income tax.
No, a lot of people are fans of it, man. A lot, in my travels, they're like, "Man, you guys don't have an income tax." Like, back in the day, I was like, "I don't know what you mean, but okay."
Mm-hmm. Well, can you imagine paying your income tax and then having to pay your state income tax as well? It's just double tax.
See, I'm already upset about property taxes, bro. I that's one of the main reasons I have you on the show. I want you to explain to us what we can do to property tax. But either way, so sales tax is one of the major ones. Federal, what else? Talk to us.
We sales tax. Oil and gas severance taxes. That's charged to oil and gas industry. Gasoline tax. There's just multiple ways. Vehicle registration fees. The list goes on and on. Yeah. But the biggest money generator for the state is your sales tax. And the reason that's really important right now is you have a lot of families, and rightfully so, staying at home. We don't have people out there shopping the way they usually do, and that's hurting the state's economy.
Yeah. I think it's even the nation. But yeah, man, it's tough there. When for example, somebody like myself, when somebody makes a comment like, "You're my state rep, how do you represent this area?" What do you say to that kind of comment?
If you have an issue with a state agency or even a federal agency, minor things like, "Hey, I can't even renew my driver's license because they say I have a warrant in another county and that's not me." Little issues like that, I call them constituent services. We help out. If there's ever an issue having to do with the federal government, maybe somebody got a delayed payment or on their income tax or on their income refund or something of that nature, I put them in contact with somebody at the congressman's office. But what I do is I go up to Austin. I have to represent the entire state as being a state representative. But more importantly, if there's ever an opportunity to help out, South Texas, I'm going to do that. This past legislative session, fortunately, we were in a really good budget position at the time. This was pre-pandemic. So I was able to allocate some money for the library commissions, $1 million for the libraries down in South Texas. Peñitas benefited. I got some money for the Peñitas cemetery. They needed to redo that. It's designated as a historical monument, so we wanted to make sure we would address that. I also represent the city of Ed Couch. I was able to get them money, $1 million to develop a park. Harlingen, they have a special needs park, and I was able to get them $1 million to expand that park as well. and I got some money for the city of La Feria as well. So, I'm able to kind of help my district, and that's what I try to do. But more importantly, I tell everybody I'm going to represent South Texas and do whatever I can for all the cities. But at the same time, I have to make decisions, based on the needs of the entire state, not just the Valley. But the Valley is near and dear to me. That's the area that I always try to help out. UTRGV, I always try to make sure that they're fully funded, make sure that they have the medical school, has the funding that they need to continue forward and continue growing that university like they are.
Man, I'll tell you what, I mean, from a person is like, hey, we need the Valley to grow, but at the same time, like you say, it's a big responsibility. I know, when you talk about the floor and the house and the lobbying, how about this? Let's just go into, can you explain, because, it's a big, like I got moved into a property tax Facebook group. Is growing and is growing and is growing. One of my mentors, Ann Engler, I don't know if she's watching or not, big advocate. She showed me how to protest taxes. I had her on the show the other day. And you explained it a little bit to me. What do you tell people when we say, like, for example, me, being as ignorant as I am, I'd say, Oscar and the state reps, I need you guys to make a law, because you guys make laws to stop these local people from taxing us so much. Like, I mean, of course, my stuff is way off, but what can you give us a run through that?
This is a constant issue that we battle in the legislature. I mean, I feel you, Rudy. I understand. Citizens are getting taxed out of their homes, so we're trying to always pass meaningful legislation to make sure that property taxes are down. Now, the cons to that is you have cities, municipalities coming to the legislature telling us, if you do that, we can't provide essential services. We can't pay for police officers, for firefighters, for whatever services they have. Now, that's, based on what the municipality is telling us. So we're constantly trying to decrease property taxes. We're trying to pass meaningful legislation. But what ends up happening is, we can go ahead and pass meaningful legislation to lower, the tax rates for Texas citizens. But if the appraisal district is going to hike up the appraisal on your home, they're basically undoing whatever we did. Right. And, you said something very smart right now. You went out and protested your property taxes. But what's sad is that many, Texans find themselves constantly protesting their property taxes every single year.
Yeah, let's put a stop to that.
And that's very unfortunate. So we've tried and passing meaningful legislation. And I'm a big proponent for the taxpayers. And I understand that people are getting taxed out of their homes, and it's not right. And we just have to find out, what we can do. And that's where you have to tell your locals, like, hey, quit increasing the taxes, quit taxing us. Now, whenever you see development and you see infrastructure from a city, from a school, from a county, a lot of that carries expenses with it, right? You build a building, you have to pay the utilities, you have to pay the, whatever to upkeep it, right? So it's important that when decisions are being made, they're going to have long-term financial consequences. The voters, and more importantly, the citizens, make the decision whether or not they want to make those funding choices. Because I tell everyone, it's easy to make a down payment on the car. It's very difficult to continue to make the ongoing payments.
And that's a great point, because you get your $3,000 savings. Here's my down payment, but now you have a $700 payment on a truck. Is like, wait a minute, I can't afford $700. And I think that's a great analogy. I think you shared it with me when we were on the phone. So when you talk about your locals, well, who are my locals? I have no idea who my when you say that, what do you mean locals?
You have your county government, right? And then you have your city government, and then your school government. You also have like the South Texas College, that's the government. You have your utility districts. So the key is just electing, good individuals to represent those districts, and making sure that whatever they're doing is in accordance with what the public wants. Just holding them accountable. Yeah.
So it comes down to the voters need to make sure that we're electing the right people locally that are going to say, we're going to put an end to this property tax appraisal district of hiking up the stuff every year. Is that, am I kind of on the right track?
To a certain extent, Rudy, but the key is making sure that the decisions being made, looking at what the long-term effects are, right? If I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to build a library, and we're going to burden the taxpayers with those expenses, is that something that the community wants? Now, many times it is, and we need one, right? So that's okay. You say, you know what, me, Rudy, I'm okay with paying taxes and paying.
You're breaking up, Oscar. Hold on, pause it for a little bit.
And I want my community to have that out. Okay, so when an expenditure is made, you say, you know what? I appreciate that. It's going to help the community. It's going to help my family directly, indirectly, and it's going to continue to help our youth. And I want the public to have this available to them. You make that decision. But many times decisions may be made without having the foresight to look at what the ongoing expenses are going to be going forward. So it's very important that when decisions are made, you evaluate them and you say, is this something that the community wants and that the community wants to pay for?
That's interesting you bring that up, because I'm going to have to bring it up when I have the city officials come on the show. I know I have 2 city officials coming up next week that are up for re-election in the city of Palmview. I have some school board candidates. They want to run for school board. So when we talk, let's switch it up a little bit. I'm sure property taxes, we could be here for a whole hour going in a loop. We'll try to figure that out here in the next few years or next few months with voting. When it comes to school boards, and I've just learned, I had Marco Suarez, he's a school board member over at McAllen High School or the McAllen School District. And then some people told me about the Robin Hood Act, the 80-20, and how that money gets dispersed. Are you part of that? Part of your committee disperses those appropriations, or is that totally something separate?
Part of the committee does. There's formulas depending on the funding. We're in an area that benefits from Robin Hood, right? That benefits from the richer districts, and people pay their property taxes. It takes it from those districts and it allocates them to us down here in South Texas. The reason you see so much growth is because we have a high student population, right? More high student population. Every student has a number, and they're worth a certain amount of money based on the state size. So we have benefited. We're an area that's really benefited from the Robin Hood Act. I think the only, maybe Port Isabel may be the only one that is subject to recapture based on their property values, where they have to send money to the state, but we benefit because we receive money from the state.
Right. Yeah, I know. I got 2 people that give me a hard time about that water park and the golf course, and I'm like, look, man, that was here. I just started. I don't know anything about politics. They're like, no, and it's they go into it's unfair, and you took all the money and the Robin Hood. I'm like, man, I don't. By chance, because I'm gonna have school board candidates come up. Do you know what I know Marco Suarez mentioned 80 cents to the dollar and versus 20 cents to the dollar. How does that work on what money goes where?
Well, it's a very complex formula, Rudy, what it boils down to. But, everybody, once they reach a certain threshold and they go into the golden pennies, the copper pennies, there's all these terms that they use. But the best way to use the analogy is every district has a bucket, right? Your district has a bucket. When you get your property taxes and you pour water into that bucket, once the bucket is full, it flows out and then it goes into other buckets. So if you're in a district, that has a bucket that's this big, a very high property wealth of River Oaks, a Highland Park in Dallas.
Right. Yeah.
They fill it up pretty quick, and then all that excess money trickles down to poorer districts, like the ones that we have here in South Texas. So a lot of times you have, heartburn from a lot of the people that live in those districts, because I'll give you an example. There's districts in Dallas, right? They have high property values. They pay high property taxes. But those districts don't have some of the facilities that we have down here in the valley. And if they want to have a nice stadium, or they want to have a pool or anything like that, they have to pass bonds, and they have to pass an additional tax in order to pay for those facilities. So that's where you get into those issues, because some individuals feel that it's not fair because they don't have the same facilities that we have down here. I mean, the youth down here, we're very blessed because of the way the system is set up, but they feel like, hey, we're paying for all those facilities, and in order for my child or my area to have those facilities, I have to pay an additional tax.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, from an educator standpoint, a PE coach myself, on Mendezville, when I go at Mendezville ISD, my made up, district from my mind, I don't have a cap. It's, I want 8-lane rubber tracks. But now that you're telling me that we get money from all these schools that have a lot more money, or areas and taxes, hey, give me my 8-lane rubber track at all valley or low income. Granted, Marco even said it. He explained to me, you have to understand 80% of that is for salary. It's millions of dollars to pay the people. And then, 20%, it's a lot less money that can go by real quick. But I'm glad we're having this conversation. People that listen, especially the educators, the teachers, the fine arts that we always want. Give me this, give me that. We have to have those kind of understandings. Wait. Oscar, when you're on the floor, especially right now with, president coming up and Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and, bipartisan and, far right, far left. I'm a kind of guy, me on a very personal note, and I'm on a mission to say we have to stop this. Oh, you're a Democrat. Oh, you're a Republican. It's like, what is the issue and how can we come together to solve it? Who cares what your party is? We're all humans. We're all individuals. We care for the community. We care for the people in our state. How does that go in the state legislature, at the House, in the Senate?
The Texas legislature is very different from Washington, D.C. We work together. I mean, you have your left and your far right, and then you have everybody in the middle. And usually everybody in the middle is who kind of where everything works through, right? The biggest adversaries. Those become the biggest, most debatable matters. But, I like to say a lot of my friends are in the Republican Party, a lot of my colleagues that I work with hand in hand, and we try to run differently than DC. And that's been the way it's always been since I've been there in 13. Sometimes there is some partisan issues, but, generally the members try to stay away from that. And I tell everyone, for my Democratic and Republican colleagues, especially Republicans, it's like, hey, I may not agree with you all the time, but I'm going to respect your opinion. But
Right.
we usually work together. I mean, believe it or not, 8 out of 10 times, we all want the best that's in the best thing for the state of Texas. We all want to work together and we want to continue to have the state grow.
Man, we're the Lone Star State, man. We are the Lone Star State. I think, and I never knew, how proud people from Texas are and how proud other areas know we are. And I get to Indiana State and they're like, oh, you're from Texas. I'm like, well, yeah. And, we're Texas. And, you get into it. I'm in Los Angeles and you get into it. And, actually I was in a fraternity that, made up professional fraternity and my nickname was Lone Star. So that was pretty neat. So when you talk about partisan issues, like, can you give us an idea of sometimes that it kind of does get bipartisan and stuff like that?
Sometimes there's issues on healthcare, right? Expansion of Medicaid, right or wrong. And you see, this is a very interesting issue. Folks say, well, you're expanding Obamacare, right? And the Republican Party sometimes has that opinion, but many times, the rural areas of Texas are represented by a lot of Republicans, right? And those are the areas that hurt because, they're kind of in the same situation that areas like South Texas that don't have a lot of insured population, rural Texas. So many of their needs are similar to ours. And, sometimes DC makes the issues very divisive, right? Depending on what's trending and where at one time there was a lot of issues on the border and the frontera being, basically a track for smuggling. And there was a lot of issues on border security. So it just depends on what's going on with the times. But I like to think that a lot of my colleagues, on the other side of the aisle, on the Republican side, the ones that I work with, we try to stay above that. We try not to get bogged down with those issues. I mean, we want to continue to see the state grow. And, the Texas legislature is a very interesting place. Coming from a guy that grew up on the 5 Mile lines, went to school in La Jolla. I mean, when I first ran for politics and got elected to the legislature, I didn't know anybody in the Capitol, like no one. Right. Yeah. I had this joke. Like I finally found out where the restroom was, but I was able to climb. I was able to climb up and form some really good friendships and move up. And I tell everybody, the fact of the matter is it's a beautiful form of government that somebody that grew up in the Mile Lines, went to a public school district, went through community college and got educated and walked into that building not knowing anybody, just a couple years later was able to kind of move up in the ranks and actually feel like they're contributing to the entire process and have some say.
No, man, I bet it's scary. It's got to be a little scary, but hey, you learn, and you gotta have that strong mindset that we had. You gotta have that strong mindset. It's interesting you mentioned healthcare, and I mean, for example, my thing is, when Obamacare came about, I'm like, man, it's kind of unfair for the people here in the Valley because a lot of people here in the Valley, pues all they got to do is go down to Progreso, Reynosa, wherever it is, get their meds and come back, right? So that was kind of unfair. Does that ever come into play or that understanding or no?
No, the issue is sometimes when you get into those partisan issues, right, it's hard for people wanting to accept something that a Democratic president ran with or a Republican president, right? That's where it becomes a kind of a polarizing issue. But the fact of the matter is a lot of our money, the state of Texas, through our federal income tax goes to DC. And the way I see it is if our money is going to Washington for the federal government, we should try to get that money back one way or the other. I mean, it's
Yeah.
rightfully belongs to Texans.
Right.
So, there was a lot of pushback when things like that had initially happened, with the expansion of the Affordable Care Act, and I just think through time, especially being in a pandemic, we're looking at healthcare a little bit differently, right? We want to make sure that we continue to keep every single Texan safe, and we continue to provide, access to healthcare. Now we're going to be looking at issues such as telemedicine, and that's going to be expanded to make sure that everybody has services and is evaluated, and we're just being more efficient. Healthcare and education are the biggest cost drivers in the state's budget. They're the biggest. And the reason that's super important is whenever we get into a budget deficit, that's the first things that get cut because it's the biggest budget drivers.
Yeah.
So, it's important to understand this because we're going to go into a cycle where we're going to have a tight budget. And I don't want to cut healthcare during a pandemic. I don't think anybody does. And education in general. So we really have to figure out what revenue streams the state can generate in order to continue to provide the services that we're providing right now.
Well, Oscar, it's funny you mentioned revenue right now because it just clicked. So I have a buddy, one is, you watch the Netflix, I watch the Narcos, and then I watched the last Narc, which was very interesting. I don't know if you caught that with Kiki Camarena's story. And, it's kind of like this and like that. And, everybody has their point of views. And then I see my buddy, like, for example, I have a lot of friends too in LA and where I work. I watch the Joe Rogan show. He's smoking pot on the show. I got my buddy in Las Vegas on his Instagram. He's smoking it up. Not that it's good. I'm not talking about good or bad where they're smoking it up. I'm just talking about watching the show, the narcs, the war on drugs, and then I'm watching these states that have legalized. My mind is taxes, revenue, taxes, revenue. Is there any talks on saying legalize marijuana for revenue purposes and decriminalizing some of these small crimes, or does that even happen here in the state of Texas?
Okay. So on the decriminalization stuff, we've discussed that, both Democrats and Republicans. Small misdemeanor amounts, it's very costly to the system. If somebody gets caught with a joint of marijuana, Class A, Class B misdemeanor, unfortunately, if they don't have the funds to bond out, they're sitting in a jail cell. Then they have to get a court-appointed lawyer. Then they become part of the system. And many times, it's the poor minorities that are kind of taken advantage of. And they'll get a mark on their record, which limits their ability to gain a meaningful employment, right? So we have to really look at that. And that's, the decriminalization aspect of it. We got to find out what's the best thing for society going forward and what's going to be the most efficient thing as a state, cost-wise. As for the expansion of, marijuana, you have various aspects of it. You have the medicinal use, which we have a limited scope right now on medicinal marijuana oils, right? Cannabis oils. So there's currently laws in place, right? It's very limited on what you can use it for. And that, from the inception of it back in, I wanted to say it was 2017. And in 2019, we expanded more of the use. So it's continuing to expand. That's the medicinal use, right?
Right.
And then you have the recreational stuff, which is what you mentioned. Now, can you generate revenue? Yes, but you also have to understand that if you do that, you're going to have to regulate it. And you have to do it right to make sure people would follow whatever rules would be in place.
Kind of like beer, tobacco, and alcohol, kind of like that.
Yes. And that's going to cost money, and that's going to cost the state money. So it has to be done strategically. First of all, you have to find out if there's even an appetite. Is the general consensus of the state wanting to expand, recreational use of marijuana? I don't know. I mean, that's really something for all Texans to kind of decide if that's something they want to do. And if you do, then you have to look at the growers, the suppliers, the distributors, the storefront. I spoke to some legislators from California, and they told me.
I was about to ask you that.
They told me, what, Oscar, in hindsight, there's a lot of leaks. We're finding a big problem where there's marijuana being sold that's illegal marijuana, right? So you have a storefront selling X amount that's being taxed, and then the rest of it is basically coming in through the back door. So you have to be very, very careful on what you do. Now, us being, we're going to start session in January of 2021. We're dealing with a pandemic. We're trying to make rules right now and decide on what direction we're going to go.
Probably number one, right?
Those decisions will come up in January, depending on what the rules are and the social distancing. We're going to have a little bit of bandwidth, right? We have to pass the budget. We have to address our supplemental. And I just don't know if it's going to be a session to really look at that. Because if it's done, it's something that we really, really have to focus on and make sure that we do it right.
Yeah, and like I said, my biggest thing is just for the revenue part, cost versus profit, taxes. Maybe lower our taxes there. I'm just thinking outside the box from all these shows I watched. Seeing all these other states, Colorado, Nevada, LA, from the people I know there. Like a great. I'm glad you mentioned about you already talked to a legislature from California, and of course loopholes like there isn't everywhere else. But
we have to do it right. If we're going to
yeah,
do it, Rudy, we have to make sure we really look at it, we study it, and we vet it. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we haven't been able to dedicate the time to make a big decision like that, because that's a historical change. You do something like that, you're going to open up a bunch of doors, positive and negative.
especially in Texas, man.
Yeah,
Especially in Texas.
so you need to make sure it's done right. You need to make sure you're going to have to do your cost benefit analysis, look at the pros and look at the cons, and make an educated decision.
Well, a bit. Thank you for that information. I'm sure people watching will appreciate that. I know I do. One thing that's going on right now, seeing that the president is up for re-election, how does their wall or him, the wall? What is the perspective in the state of Texas? The wall. How does that go?
It's really interesting that you say that. We've been funding a lot of the border effort, and I'm sure there was time when you would see all the DPS officers down here, right? That's kind of been scaled back.
I really did like that, though. I enjoyed having them down here because I wanted people to know, hey, we have law here.
Yeah, well, and a lot of those troopers ended up staying here and making this, their hometown, which is great, right? That increases our revenue, and they were shopping at our local shops and restaurants and staying in hotels. I mean, it was generating a lot of revenue. But what I saw being in the legislature was a lot of the resources that the Department of Public Safety had were being used by the federal government, right? So we had the aerostats, we had the planes. They were using our technology to further their cause. And it's kind of a catch-22, from the state standpoint. It's like, I understand what we're doing, but at the same time, it's kind of the federal government's obligation to protect the border. So why would we be paying for all that? Because at the end of the day, it's my money, it's your money, Rudy, it's everybody's out there. Their money. So, we need to be above. Over time, it's kind of the effort's been scaled back. But that was discussed. Those were some of the issues where you would see a division on what we needed and what my colleagues thought about the wall. Some were for it and some are against it, of course.
Yeah, and the only reason I mentioned that is I really didn't know. I had never seen the wall, and I saw it once. I ran into down in Mendezville. My brother's running for a utility district, Awasud down there, and I ended up running into one of my classmates, George Pidon, and I said, "Hey, George, what's going on?" And I started talking to him, and he started, "Hey, my brother's running for Awasud. What are concerns?" And then he started telling me about the wall and people. He sees people go by and all these things, and I'm like, "Okay, cool." And and it was kind of cool. I know I'm not the running for office. My brother is, but it was interesting hearing the concerns from him, from a ex, classmate or a former, alumni. And I'm like, man, that it's different perspective because I don't live here. It's very different. So I'm sure people, when we're talking about different side of the aisle, you're from the area, you've seen it, they haven't seen it. It's one of those, well, you don't know if you've never been there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, definitely. And there was a time when we were having a lot of home invasions, and you would see all those high-speed chases on Expressway 83, and those have kind of slowed down. And I really attribute it to the Department of Public Safety doubling down in South Texas and having all that police reinforcement, and things have kind of been safer for the community. The way I see it, and I tell everybody, is, hey, if you want to use taxpayer money from Dallas, Houston, Austin, and San Antonio to bring it to South Texas, I'm all for it.
Yeah. Why not? Help us out and make this area grow. Another thing is the re-election, for example. I'm not too familiar. I haven't done my homework, and I should have. What do you know? What's going on up here? I know Monica's running for re-election against. Do you know who that is? Gonzalez. You don't know?
I don't know. I really don't follow much of the local race. I mean, I know some of the candidates, but I tell everybody, those are all those local issues on what folks want to, go and elect who they want to elect.
Yeah, no, I'll take care of that, and I'll do my homework and make sure I post on Facebook and talk about it more here on Mendezville Live. Let me ask you, feel that coming down back towards the end of the show is, can you give us, like, I was wondering, like, I was like, man, Oscar's probably, everything he goes on there, or Juan Lopez said Vicente, it's probably Vicente Gonzalez. Can you give us maybe some of the 3 things or 4 things that you're like really proud of that you came to fruition while you were in legislature the past, how long have you been there? 6 years, 8 years?
I'm going on my 5th term right now. I'm very proud of, being involved in the budget process, I've been really lucky, as the vice chairman of the budget, being on legislative budget board and being the conferee for the last two legislative sessions. And the fact that you can make a decision and have that money come back to South Texas in your district directly, a direct appropriation saying, let's put $1 million here. Let's put $100,000, for the city of Peñitas, for their cemetery, for the expansion of it. Let's put some money for some parks and Ed Couch. And being able to get those state funds and helping out our community here is really the best thing. And every legislative session that I've been there, I've worked on the budget. So I'm always trying to bring that money back home and bring home the bacon and take care of South Texas. And that's really what the most thing that I'm proud of. I've been very fortunate to be on that committee and work on that big bill, right? Because it is a bill. And that's really what I always try to do. I try to, make sure that we get our fair share and make sure that we can get our needs addressed. But more importantly, if we have some wants, try to take care of that as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. Needs first, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any, like, in hindsight now, maybe, when you were starting off, that you're like, man, I got that one wrong, or as a state, we could have done better. We should have done it like this. Is there any of those?
It's funny you say that because we always pass legislation, right? And what ends up happening is we'll pass legislation. And then after the session, we do what they call interim hearings, right? And we go back and sometimes we revisit the legislation that we passed, right? And we say, hey, you know what? In retrospect, let's do this over that. Let's make these modifications. So at the beginning of the next legislative session, we make those changes. So we're kind of always critiquing our paper and trying to make things better. The unfortunate thing is because of the pandemic, we haven't been able to meet. So it hasn't been kind of the normal process that we've had during the interim. So there was a lot of things that we wanted to look at. We wanted to look at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, look at some of the facilities and trying to maybe downsize or trying to address, the needs where we're paying so much on deferred maintenance to upkeep a building and what made sense and where can we save money. We're not going to be able to do a lot of those things. And when we do, we're already going to be in session because unfortunately, because of the pandemic, it's limited our ability to meet. There's rules that we have to follow. So we're not able to just have a virtual meeting because the rules don't allow us to do that.
Oh, really?
No, they don't. So in order for us to change the rules, we have to be in session. So because of all that, it's made things, very difficult. So that's the unfortunate thing that we're dealing with. But, we're going to make lemonade with the lemons, going forward and just kind of adjust to the process.
Man, see, that's I didn't know that. I mean, there's a lot of things I don't know, but I'm hopefully, and that's why I wanted to bring you on because I'm asking you questions that I don't know, that I'm sure a lot of people in the area don't know. And we get to talk about it, and
another thing is this, I tell everybody, the legislature of Texas is very unique. It's a citizens legislature. We don't get paid for being there. Okay.
Really?
This is not like Congress. It's not like, being a county judge or whatnot. We don't get paid. So, we go over, we go over there, we do. So that, but it's a citizen legislature, and it's always been set up in that way because they encourage us to go serve and then go back into our communities and see how the communities are run. And you want small business owners, you want people that work in different industries because they all bring a different perspective, and that's what makes us very unique. Because California, that's their job, they get paid. It's very different. So in the legislature, we don't get paid as full-time employees. It's a citizens legislature.
So they don't pay you at all. You just go and you gotta. Like
yes. So, a lot of times, I commend all my colleagues because it's a sacrifice financially, not to mention the amount of time that you're away from your family. It's a great benefit. Like I tell everybody, it's a beautiful thing. You're very humble to represent your district, but at the same time, representing your district well forces you to stay away from home, especially during those 6 months.
And that's the House and the Senate, both?
The House and the House and the Senate. That's correct.
So while you're up there, you're paying your own way.
Get up kind of stay up with the cost of living in Austin. It makes it, basically a wash. And sometimes you have to dip into your own pocket to pay for that.
All right, say that again. You start over after my question because you kind of froze. While you're up there, you go ahead.
When you're in session, you'll receive a per diem to help you pay for your living expenses. But because of the cost in Austin being very high, sometimes you have to dip into your own pocket. Like for instance, I actually just got a letter from the state that I have to send them a check for $2,500 to continue my state insurance. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So, and see, that's good to know. I'm sure I didn't know that. I'm sure a lot of people didn't know that. So maybe I won't be running for state rep. I don't have the money to 6 months to keep up, man, unless this For Life stuff starts paying me here in the next few years. But hey, that's pretty good information. Hey, man, all I got, I enjoy the information. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to give you a little piece of advice. I told Eric Montalvo, make sure you announce the tournament a month and a half in advance so everybody gets a chance to get in shape. So make sure you get your little jogs in and get in shape, man, for that tournament. I'm excited to have you out there, man.
I'll be ready. I think I'm already ready. We can play next week if you want.
All right, Oscar, man. Any other messages you want to send to the people, man?
I think it's important going forward. Everybody needs to stay safe, take care of their family, continue to social distance. I commend all the educators for the job that they're going to have going forward to educate our youth. We're going into this virtual learning program. It's going to be an experiment. I mean, it's the hand that we're dealt, but it's important that we take care of everybody in the district, especially, going to La Jolla ISD, because we have a lot of youth in that district that may not have the internet access or the connectivity or the devices. So it's important. And I ask all the teachers to make sure they put in that extra effort to continue to educate them, because I'm worried. I'm really concerned that we may fall behind. So I challenge everybody, all the educators, to make sure that they double down on this effort and do whatever needs to be done, because we don't want our students falling behind. And you never know, they're going to take care of us. Our youth from that area is going to be the future leaders of the community. So we need to make sure that we do our part and we take care of them right now.
Hey, man, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Oscar. Have a good night, man.
Thank you, brother. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, everyone. So that's my man, Oscar Longoria. Man, that's a pretty nice session. I learned a little bit. I hope everybody out there learned a little bit of legislation, Senate, House. I got a lot of research to do. It costs money. Man, and I will say this for all the voters. My objective here is for all the voters to be informed of what goes on. Next week, I have, starting on Sunday, I have some school board candidates. I got some city officials up for re-election. And just by talking with Oscar and talking about taxes and budgets and his appropriations, my main concern when I'm voting is, are the people that we're going to vote into these positions, elected officials, how are they going to deal with the budget? Are they going to overspend? Are they going to be frugal with their spending? What kind of positions are being made up? Should we cut positions? Different things like that. I think the number one concern for me as a voter is the money. What are you doing with our money, or the money that's allocated from the state and all these things? So either way, we're going to have a pretty good some sessions starting Sunday. So stay tuned. Once again, hopefully you guys enjoyed it for tonight. Tonight's broadcast is brought to you by Elite Wellness Center. Call them up for all your wellness needs. From For Life, the immune system company. Mendez Sports Training, developing speed and sports skills. And if you need any of supplements, you go to forlife.com/Rudy Mendez. Help your immune system. And that's about it, folks. You guys have a good night. Peace.